Subscribe to Story Lab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Kent Ayers discovered the first bruise on a Tuesday evening in late September. His son Toby stood in the bathroom doorway, fresh from his shower, a purple-yellow mark spreading across his left forearm like spilled watercolor. Kent was sitting at the kitchen table, reviewing blueprints for the Victorian mansion restoration his firm had just been contracted to complete, when the 9-year-old shuffled in wearing his Superman pajamas. "Hey buddy, what happened to your arm?" Kent set down his red pencil and motioned Toby closer. The boy was small for his age, with Kent's same dark hair and his mother's green eyes, though lately those eyes had seemed more guarded than usual. Toby glanced at the bruise, as if noticing it for the first time. "I don't know. Maybe I bumped it at school?" Kent examined it gently. The bruise was substantial, roughly the size of a silver dollar, with distinct edges that suggested impact rather than a casual bump. As a restoration architect who'd spent 15 years studying structural integrity and the telltale signs of damage, Kent had developed an eye for detail that extended beyond buildings. "This didn't look right. Does it hurt?" Kent asked. "Not really." Toby pulled his arm back, wrapping it around his middle. "Can I have a snack?" Kent watched his son root through the pantry, selecting a granola bar with the deliberate focus of someone trying to change the subject. The boy had been quieter lately, less enthusiastic about their weekend trips to the climbing gym or their tradition of building elaborate Lego cities on the living room floor. Kent had attributed it to typical kid stuff, maybe issues at school, or the growing pains of approaching double digits. His wife Sherry breezed in from the garage, her yoga mat tucked under her arm, blonde hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She'd taken up fitness with almost religious dedication over the past 6 months, attending classes 5 times a week and working with a personal trainer named Roman Wheeler twice weekly. Kent had encouraged it. She seemed happier, more energized. Though lately, she also seemed more distant, always checking her phone, always with somewhere to be. "How was your session?" Kent asked. "Intense. Roman really pushed us today." She dropped her mat by the door and grabbed a protein shake from the refrigerator, barely glancing at Toby. "I'm going to shower." Kent turned back to his blueprints, but his mind kept returning to that bruise. He made a mental note to check in with Toby's teacher, Mrs. Dorothy Carey, a kind woman in her 50s who'd taught 3rd grade for 20 years and seemed to genuinely care about her students. 3 days later, Kent found another bruise on Toby's shin, then one on his shoulder. Each time, Toby's explanations were vague. Maybe he fell during recess. Maybe he hit the door frame. Maybe he didn't remember. Kent pressed gently, asking if someone at school was hurting him, if he was being bullied. Toby always said no, his voice small and final, shutting down any further discussion. "Kids are clumsy," Sherry said when Kent brought it up over dinner. She speared a piece of grilled chicken, not looking up from her plate. "Remember when you broke your arm in 4th grade, doing something stupid on the playground?" "This feels different," Kent said. "The pattern, the frequency. You're overthinking it." Sherry finally met his eyes, and Kent saw something there he couldn't quite name. "Irritation? Defensiveness? You always do this, Kent. You analyze everything until there's a problem where there isn't one." He's a 9-year-old boy. They get bruises. Kent wanted to argue, but found himself second-guessing his own instincts. Sherry was right that he tended toward overanalysis. It was what made him excellent at his job, but sometimes exhausting in daily life. Maybe he was seeing shadows where none existed. That weekend, Kent's closest friend and former college roommate, Stephen Michael, came over to watch football. Stephen taught physics at the local university and shared Kent's love of problem-solving and craft beer. They settled into the basement, and Kent found himself describing the situation. "So, what does your gut tell you?" Stephen asked, his analytical mind already working through the variables. "My gut tells me something's wrong, but everyone keeps telling me I'm overreacting." "Everyone? Or just Sherry?" Kent paused, beer halfway to his lips. "What do you mean?" Stephen leaned back in his chair, choosing his words carefully. "I don't want to start anything, but I saw her at that new coffee shop downtown last Tuesday morning. She was with that trainer guy, Roman something. They were sitting really close, laughing, looked intimate." The words landed in Kent's chest like a physical blow. They work out together. She probably ran into him. At 9 in the morning on a Tuesday? Doesn't she train with him on Thursday evenings? Kent didn't have an answer for that. He deflected, made excuses, but Stephen's observation burrowed into his mind like a termite into old wood. That night, after Sherry fell asleep, Kent lay awake staring at the ceiling, trying to connect dots he didn't want to see forming a picture. The following Tuesday, Kent left work early, telling his team at Ayers Restoration that he had a dentist appointment. Instead, he drove past the fitness center where Sherry supposedly had her training sessions. Her car wasn't in the parking lot. He felt ridiculous, like a paranoid husband from a bad television drama, but something compelled him forward. He drove to the coffee shop Stephen had mentioned and found Sherry's silver SUV parked outside. Through the window, he could see her sitting across from Roman Wheeler. Roman was everything Kent wasn't: tall, athletic, with the kind of casual confidence that came from spending most of your life being told you were attractive. He wore a fitted black athletic shirt that showed off his build, and as Kent watched, he reached across the table and covered Sherry's hand with his own. She didn't pull away. Instead, she smiled, that same bright smile she used to give Kent when they first started dating 12 years ago. Kent drove home in a daze, his mind racing through implications and possibilities. An affair. His wife was having an affair. The realization settled over him like cold water. Shocking, but somehow clarifying. Was that why she'd been so dismissive about Toby's bruises? Was she too wrapped up in her secret relationship to notice her own son? That evening, Toby came home from school and went straight to his room. When Kent knocked and entered, he found his son sitting on the edge of his bed, staring at his hands. A fresh bruise marked his wrist, purple and angry. "Toby." Kent sat beside him, keeping his voice gentle. "I need you to tell me what's happening. No more maybes. The truth." The boy's chin trembled. For a long moment, Kent thought he'd shut down again. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, Toby said, "I can't tell you. She said you'd be mad." Kent's heart stopped. "She? Who's she?" But Toby clamped his mouth shut, tears beginning to stream down his cheeks. Kent pulled his son into a hug, feeling the fragile bones of his ribcage, the way he trembled like a small bird. Whatever was happening, Kent needed to protect his child. Professional help, that was the next step. Tomorrow, he'd make an appointment with Toby's pediatrician, Dr. Eugene Atkinson. They'd get to the bottom of this. The next morning, Kent called Dr. Atkinson's office and explained the situation. The receptionist, hearing the concern in his voice and the description of the bruising pattern, scheduled an emergency appointment for that afternoon. Kent picked Toby up from school early, noting how the boy seemed relieved to leave the building but anxious about where they were going. Dr. Atkinson, a methodical man in his early 60s with graying temples and a gentle bedside manner, examined Toby thoroughly. He asked questions in a non-threatening way, gave the boy stickers, and made him laugh with terrible dad jokes. But when he called Kent into his private office, his expression was grave. "Mr. Ayers, I'm going to be direct with you. The bruising pattern is concerning. Different stages of healing, located in places that are inconsistent with normal childhood injuries." His blood work came back clean, no clotting disorders or vitamin deficiencies that would explain easy bruising. Combined with his emotional presentation, Dr. Atkinson paused. "I'm mandated to report suspected abuse. I've already contacted Child Protective Services." The word abuse hit Kent like a freight train. "You think I'm not accusing anyone specifically, but someone is hurting that child, Mr. Ayers. And we need to figure out who before it gets worse." Kent felt the world tilt sideways. He thought of Sherry's dismissiveness, her distraction, the affair with Roman Wheeler. He thought of Toby's cryptic words, "She said you'd be mad." His mind raced through scenarios, each more horrifying than the last. Was Roman Wheeler coming around their house when Kent was at work? Was Sherry allowing it? Or, and this thought made bile rise in his throat, was Sherry herself? No. He couldn't believe it. Wouldn't believe it. But doubt, once planted, grew like poison ivy. Over the next week, Kent watched his wife with new eyes. She was often on her phone, texting someone and smiling. She scheduled more training sessions with Roman. She seemed irritated when Kent came home early or when plans changed unexpectedly, as if his presence disrupted some carefully maintained schedule. And with Toby, she was either overly sweet or dismissive. No middle ground, no natural maternal warmth. On Friday afternoon, Kent came home to find Toby sitting at the kitchen table with an ice pack pressed to his ribs. Sherry stood at the counter chopping vegetables, her movements sharp and aggressive. What happened? Kent dropped his briefcase and moved to his son. He fell down the stairs, Sherry said before Toby could speak. Wasn't watching where he was going. Kent examined Toby, who wouldn't meet his eyes. Did you fall, buddy? Toby nodded, but the movement was mechanical, rehearsed. Kent looked at the stairs carpeted, with a sturdy handrail. Possible, certainly, but combined with everything else. I think we should take him to the ER, Kent said. For a fall? Don't be dramatic. Sherry's voice had an edge to it. He's fine. Kids are resilient. I'd feel better if a doctor checked him out. Then you take him. Sherry slammed the knife down. I have plans. Roman's hosting a group training session, and I already paid for it. Of course. Roman. Always Roman. Kent took Toby to the emergency room, where they waited for 2 hours among crying babies and people with various injuries. The ER doctor, a tired-looking woman in her 40s, examined Toby's ribs bruised but not broken and asked the same questions everyone had been asking. Toby gave the same non-answers, his eyes downcast, his small body tense. Has anyone talked to you about what happens if someone is hurting you? The doctor asked gently. Toby shook his head. Even if it's someone you love, someone you're supposed to trust, it's not okay for them to hurt you. Do you understand? Toby's eyes filled with tears, but he said nothing. The doctor looked at Kent, and in that look, he saw pity mixed with suspicion. They were wondering if he was the abuser. The thought made him sick. They were discharged with instructions to follow up with their pediatrician and a pamphlet about recognizing abuse. Kent drove home in silence, his mind churning through possibilities and plans. He needed evidence. He needed to know the truth. And if what he suspected was true, he needed to protect his son at all costs. That night, after Toby was asleep, Kent did something he'd never thought he'd do. He went through Sherry's phone. She'd left it charging in the kitchen, and he knew her passcode, their wedding anniversary. The phone unlocked, and Kent navigated to her messages. The texts with Roman Wheeler were extensive. Hundreds of messages, dating back 6 months. Kent's hand shook as he read through them. Flirtation, planning meetings, professions of love. And then, buried in a conversation from 3 weeks ago, something that made his blood run cold. Roman, we can't keep doing this. He's going to figure it out. Sherry, he won't. Kent's oblivious. Always has been. Roman, what about the kid? He's going to say something. Sherry, I'm handling it. Toby knows what happens if he talks. Kent read the message 3 times, each word burning into his brain. Toby knows what happens if he talks. The implications were devastating and clear. His wife, the woman he'd married, the mother of his child, was threatening Toby into silence. About what? The affair? Or something worse? He scrolled further, looking for more context, and found it in a conversation from last month. Sherry, I'm so tired of this. Tired of pretending. Tired of playing happy family. Roman, then let's stop. Leave him. Sherry, and give up half of everything? Kent's company is worth a fortune. The house, the savings. If I leave, I get scraps. If he leaves me, if he looks like the bad guy, I get everything. Roman, so what's your plan? Sherry, working on it. But it has to look right. Has to be airtight. Kent felt like he was falling through space. She was plotting something that involved making him look like the bad guy. His mind raced through possibilities, and then it hit him with terrible clarity. The bruises, the pattern of abuse, Toby's cryptic comments. She said you'd be mad. Sherry wasn't just having an affair. She was setting Kent up. The bruises weren't random or accidental. She was hurting Toby and coaching him to stay silent, building a case that would make Kent look like an abusive father. Once enough evidence accumulated, she'd report it, get a protective order, get full custody, and walk away with everything while Kent faced criminal charges. It was diabolical. It was unthinkable, and the evidence was right there in his hands. Kent took screenshots of everything, emailing them to himself from her phone and then deleting the sent messages. His hands were steady now, his architect's mind shifting into planning mode. He thought about going to the police immediately, but what did he have? Text messages that could be interpreted multiple ways. Suspicions. No direct evidence of Sherry hurting Toby. He needed more. He needed to catch her in the act or get Toby to tell the truth on record. But how? The answer came to him as he stared at his own phone, thinking about the home security system he'd been meaning to install. Cameras. He put cameras in the house, hidden ones, in places Sherry wouldn't think to look. If she was hurting Toby, he'd have proof. And then he'd make sure she paid for every single bruise on his son's body. Kent barely slept that night. He kept seeing Toby's face, the fear in his eyes, the trembling of his small body. His son had been carrying this burden alone, too scared to tell anyone what was happening. How long had it been going on? Weeks? Months? The thought made Kent's chest tight with rage and guilt. He should have seen it sooner, should have pushed harder, should have protected his child better. By Monday morning, Kent had a plan. He called in sick to work, something he rarely did, and spent the day installing small, wireless cameras throughout the house. One in the living room, hidden in a bookshelf. One in the kitchen, tucked behind the microwave. One in the upstairs hallway, disguised as a smoke detector. And one in Toby's room, positioned to capture anyone who entered. The cameras connected to his phone via an app, recording continuously to the cloud. When Sherry came home that evening from her training session, or whatever she'd actually been doing, Kent was making dinner, acting as normal as possible. She seemed pleased that he'd made her favorite pasta. And for a moment, Kent almost doubted everything he'd discovered. This woman, laughing at something on TV, helping Toby with his homework, seemed incapable of the cruelty he suspected. But then he caught the way she looked at Toby when she thought no one was watching, cold, calculating, impatient. And he saw how Toby flinched when she reached toward him, even if it was just to brush hair from his forehead. The boy's body knew what his words couldn't say. That night, after they'd all gone to bed, Kent lay awake with his phone under his pillow, the camera app open, watching the feeds. Nothing happened. The next night, the same, and the next. Kent began to wonder if he'd been wrong, if his paranoia had led him to see conspiracy where there was only unfortunate circumstance. Then, on Thursday evening, everything changed. Sherry had announced that morning that she'd be home late, a special evening training session with Roman's advanced group. Kent told her that was fine. He'd handle dinner and bedtime. What he didn't tell her was that he'd also taken the afternoon off work, claiming a migraine, and would be home hours earlier than usual. At 5:30 p.m., Kent pulled into the driveway and parked in the garage, but he didn't enter the house immediately. Instead, he pulled up the camera feeds on his phone and watched. Toby came home from school at 3:45. Led in by Sherry, who'd been home the whole time, despite her claims about training. Kent watched his wife follow their son into the kitchen, her movements sharp and aggressive. Even through the small screen, he could read the tension in her body. "We need to talk," Sherry said, her voice picked up by the camera's sensitive microphone. "About what?" Toby's voice was small, scared. "About you and your big mouth. Mrs. Carey called me today. Said you seemed upset. Said you'd started to say something about being hurt at home, but then clammed up. What did you tell her?" "Nothing. I didn't say anything, I promise." Kent watched Sherry grab Toby's arm, squeezing hard enough that the boy gasped. "You better not have. You know what happens if you tell anyone, right? We've talked about this." I know. Toby was crying now, trying to pull away. "Your father is a bad man, Toby. He has a temper. He hurts people when he's angry. If anyone finds out about these bruises, they'll think he did it. They'll take you away from both of us. You'll end up in foster care with strangers. Is that what you want?" "No," Toby sobbed. "Then keep your mouth shut." Sherry released his arm, and Toby stumbled backward. "Go to your room. I don't want to see you until dinner." Kent's hands were shaking so hard he almost dropped his phone. The rage that filled him was unlike anything he'd ever experienced, hot and cold simultaneously, clarifying and blinding. He wanted to run into that house and tear Sherry apart with his bare hands. But the architect in him, the planner, the problem solver, held him back. This was evidence. This was proof. He had her now. He watched Toby run upstairs, saw Sherry pull out her phone and text someone, Roman, no doubt. Then she poured herself a large glass of wine and sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone with a satisfied smirk on her face. Kent sat in his car for 10 more minutes, forcing himself to breathe, to think clearly. He had video evidence of Sherry threatening Toby and grabbing him hard enough to hurt. It was something, but was it enough? A good lawyer could argue she was just being a strict parent, that the grabbing was accidental, that the conversation was taken out of context. No, Kent needed more. He needed her to do something undeniable on camera. And he had a terrible feeling that opportunity would come soon. 2 days later, on Saturday morning, Kent announced he needed to go into the office to review plans for the Victorian Restoration Project. It was a lie the project was ahead of schedule, and his team didn't need him. But he needed to see what happened when Sherry thought she was alone with Toby. He drove to his office, parked in the garage, and then took an Uber to a coffee shop 3 blocks from his house. He ordered a black coffee and sat in a corner booth, his phone propped on the table, watching the camera feeds. For 2 hours, nothing happened. Sherry made breakfast, cleaned the kitchen, and Toby played video games in the living room. Kent was beginning to think he'd wasted his time when his phone buzzed with a text from Sherry. "Hey, how's work going? Think you'll be home for lunch?" "Swamped here," he typed back. "Probably won't be home until 3 or 4. "Okay, I might go out for a bit then. Roman's doing a pop-up training thing at the park." Of course, she was. Kent watched as Sherry called upstairs to Toby, telling him she was going out. Then she grabbed her keys and left. The moment her car pulled out of the driveway, Kent paid for his coffee and called another Uber. He was home in 10 minutes. He entered quietly through the front door and found Toby exactly where he'd left him, playing video games, unaware his father had returned. Kent's heart ached at the sight of his son, thin and anxious, the controller gripped tight in his small hands. "Hey, buddy," Kent said softly. Toby jumped, spinning around. Relief flooded his face. "Dad, you're home." "Yeah." Kent sat down next to him on the couch. "I need to talk to you about something important, and I need you to tell me the truth, okay? No matter what anyone told you would happen if you talked. I promise you, you're safe. I'm going to protect you." Toby's eyes welled with tears. His chin trembled. And then, in a rush, it all came out. Sherry had been hurting him for months, since summer. She'd started small pinches that left no marks. Hard squeezes on his arms, shoving him into walls when Kent wasn't around. She'd told him it was his fault, that he was a difficult child, that he made her angry. She'd told him that if he said anything, everyone would think Kent did it, and Kent would go to jail, and Toby would be alone forever. As the bruises started appearing, Sherry had gotten more careful, but also more bold. She'd recruited Roman, who'd started coming over during the day when Kent was at work. Roman had been the one to push Toby down the stairs, carefully so it looked accidental. Roman had been the one to squeeze Toby's ribs hard enough to bruise. And Sherry had coached Toby on what to say if anyone asked, threatening worse if he deviated from the script. Their plan, Toby said between sobs, was to make it look like Kent was abusing him. Sherry had told Toby that once enough people suspected Kent, she'd reluctantly report it to the police, play the protective mother, and get everything in the divorce while Kent went to prison. "She said you wouldn't believe me anyway," Toby whispered. "She said you loved her more than me." Kent pulled his son into his arms, holding him tight while the boy cried years of fear and pain into his shoulder. "That's not true, Toby. That will never be true. You are the most important thing in my entire world. And I'm so sorry I didn't realize what was happening sooner." They sat like that for a long time, until Toby's sobs quieted and his breathing evened. Kent's mind was already 3 steps ahead, planning, calculating. He had Toby's testimony now. He had the video of Sherry threatening him. But would it be enough? Sherry was smart, manipulative. She'd find a way to twist it, to claim she was the victim, to make Kent seem like a controlling husband who'd doctored evidence. No, Kent needed her to incriminate herself completely, undeniably. And he needed Roman Wheeler to go down with her. An idea was forming, dark and risky, but it was the only way to ensure his son's safety and his own freedom. "Toby," Kent said carefully, "I need you to trust me for a few more days. Can you do that? Can you pretend everything is normal while I handle this?" Toby pulled back, his eyes red and swollen. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to make sure they never hurt you again. I'm going to make sure they pay for what they did. But I need you to be brave just a little longer. Can you do that for me?" Toby nodded, and Kent saw something new in his son's eyes. Hope. Kent spent Sunday researching, planning, and preparing. He contacted Franklin Manning, a detective he'd worked with years ago on a case involving stolen construction materials from one of his job sites. Franklin had since moved to the Domestic Crimes Division, and when Kent called him, the detective listened carefully to the whole story. Jesus, Kent, Franklin said when he'd finished. That's heavy. And you have proof? Video, texts, and Toby's testimony. But I need more. I need them to confess or do something that's absolutely undeniable. What are you thinking? I'm thinking I'm going to give them what they want. I'm going to make myself look like the bad guy. And when they move in for the kill, I'm going to have every second documented. Franklin was quiet for a moment. That's risky. If something goes wrong, it won't. But I need you to trust me. And I need you to be ready to move when I give you the signal. All right. But Kent, don't do anything illegal. Don't hurt them, no matter how much you want to. Let the system handle it. Kent agreed, though his definition of the system was broader than Franklin probably intended. Monday morning, Kent initiated phase 1 of his plan. He started an argument with Sherry over breakfast, something he never did. He accused her of spending too much time at the gym, of neglecting Toby, of being distant. Sherry's eyes lit up with something like excitement. This was what she'd been waiting for. Evidence of an angry, controlling husband. You're being ridiculous, she said, but her tone was calculated, designed to provoke. Am I? You're never home anymore. You barely talk to me. And Toby, Kent gestured to their son, who was watching with wide eyes. He's covered in bruises, and you don't seem to care at all. Maybe if you paid more attention to him instead of working all the time, you'd know he's just a clumsy kid. The argument escalated. Kent carefully pushing buttons while making sure to not actually say or do anything threatening. He slammed a cabinet door. He raised his voice. He stormed out of the house. All of it captured on the kitchen camera. All of it designed to make him look unhinged. Over the next 3 days, Kent continued the performance. He came home late, claimed he was working but was actually at Steven's house, coordinating details. He snapped at Sherry over small things. He seemed distracted and short-tempered. All the while, he watched the camera feeds carefully, documenting everything Sherry and Roman said when they thought he wasn't around. On Wednesday afternoon, while Kent was supposedly at work, Roman came to the house. Kent watched from his office. He'd actually gone in today, needing the alibi as Roman and Sherry sat at the kitchen table, speaking in low voices. He's losing it, Sherry said, excitement evident in her voice. Did you see him this morning? He's coming unraveled. Good, Roman replied. That's exactly what we need. A few more days of this, and you can make the call. Say you're afraid for your safety and Toby's. And you're sure about the plan? About your testimony? Roman nodded. I'll say I've noticed Kent being aggressive toward Toby when I've been over. That I saw him grab the kid roughly. They'll believe a third-party witness, especially one with no apparent motive to lie. God, I can't wait for this to be over. Sherry leaned toward Roman, and he kissed her, long and deep. A few more days and we're free. We can be together. And, with Kent's money, we can start that fitness center we've been dreaming about. Kent saved the video clip, his jaw clenched so tight it ached. They were planning to perjure themselves, to commit fraud, to destroy his life and traumatize his child, all for money and their selfish desires. The rage that had been simmering in him for days crystallized into something cold and sharp. They wanted to destroy him? Fine. He'd let them think they were succeeding, and then he'd obliterate them. Thursday evening, Kent put phase 2 into motion. He came home to find Sherry cooking dinner, another performance, playing the dutiful wife. Toby was at the table doing homework. His shoulders hunched, his body language screaming discomfort. We need to talk, Kent said, his voice flat and hard. He'd practiced this tone, this delivery. Cold, controlled, slightly menacing. Sherry turned, her expression carefully arranged into concern. About what? About us. About this marriage. I think we both know it's over. For a split second, triumph flashed across Sherry's face before she masked it with false sadness. Kent, don't say that. We can work through this. No. Kent cut her off. We can't. I'm done, Sherry. I want you out of this house. You can't just kick me out. This is my home too. Then I'll leave. I'll stay at a hotel, but I think we need space before one of us does something we'll regret. The words hung in the air, deliberately ambiguous, deliberately threatening. Kent saw Sherry's eyes widen slightly, saw her brain working, calculating. This was at the moment she'd been building toward. Fine, she said quietly. If that's what you want. Kent packed a bag, made a show of slamming drawers and muttering under his breath. He kissed Toby goodbye. The boy knew the plan, knew his father wasn't really abandoning him, and left. But he didn't go to a hotel. Instead, he went to Steven's house, 2 miles away, and set up his laptop to monitor all the camera feeds. Within an hour, Roman was at the house. Kent watched as Sherry let him in, as they celebrated Kent's departure with champagne. He watched them discuss their next steps. Sherry would call the police tomorrow, claim she was afraid Kent might hurt Toby or herself, get a protective order. Roman would back up her story. With Kent out of the house and a protective order in place, getting full custody and a favorable divorce settlement would be easy. What about the kid? Roman asked. Think he'll stick to the story? He will. Sherry's voice was hard. He knows what happens if he doesn't. Kent saved every second of the conversation. Then he sent a text to Franklin Manning. Tomorrow morning. Be ready. That night, Kent barely slept. He kept watching the feeds, ensuring Toby was safe, watching Sherry and Roman celebrate what they thought was their impending victory. Around midnight, Roman finally left, and Sherry went to bed. Kent watched her sleep. This woman he'd once loved. This woman who'd given birth to his son, and felt nothing but contempt. Friday morning arrived with the cold rain. Kent was parked outside his house by 6 a.m., watching the feeds on his phone. He saw Sherry wake up, saw her make coffee, saw her check her phone multiple times. At 7:30, she went upstairs to wake Toby for school. Kent held his breath, watching. Sherry entered Toby's room and shook him awake roughly. Get up. You're going to be late. Toby sat up, rubbing his eyes. Is Dad coming back? Eventually. But not today. Which means you and I need to have a little talk. Sherry sat on the edge of the bed, her voice syrupy sweet, but her eyes cold. Today, I'm going to talk to some police officers. And I'm going to tell them that your father has been hurting you. That I'm scared of him. Do you understand? Toby nodded, his face pale. And if they ask you questions, you're going to tell them the same thing. That Daddy gets angry and hurts you. That you're afraid of him. Can you do that? But that's not true, Toby whispered. Sherry's hand shot out, gripping Toby's arm hard enough to make him gasp. The truth doesn't matter, you stupid boy. What matters is what people believe. And they're going to believe me. Because I'm a concerned mother. And your father is an angry man who's been acting erratic. So you're going to tell them exactly what I say, or what? The voice came from the doorway. Sherry spun around to find Kent standing there, his phone in his hand, recording. Behind him stood Detective Franklin Manning and his partner, Detective Warren McCabe. Both detectives had their badges displayed, their expressions grim. Sherry's face went through a rapid series of expressions. Shock, fear, calculation, and then a desperate attempt at innocence. Kent, well, what are you doing here? Who are these men? Detectives Manning and McCabe, Franklin said, stepping into the room. Ma'am, I need you to step away from the child. I don't understand. Sherry released Toby's arm and stood, her voice taking on a trembling quality. What's going on? Kent, what did you tell them? The truth, Kent said coldly. He moved to Toby's bed and pulled his son close. The boy clung to him, finally safe. All of it. Every threat, every bruise, every lie. That's insane. I would never. Kent's been acting crazy all week. He's been threatening me and Toby. That's why I was going to call you today. Sherry turned to the detectives, tears now streaming down her face. Please, you have to believe me. He's dangerous. Ma'am, Warren McCabe said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. You're under arrest for child abuse, witness tampering, and conspiracy to commit fraud. You have the right to remain silent. No, this is wrong. He's the one who... Sherry lunged toward Kent, but Franklin intercepted her, helping his partner restrain her. As they read Sherry her rights, Kent heard a commotion downstairs. More police had arrived, and he heard Roman Wheeler's voice, loud and protesting. Kent handed Toby to a female officer who'd entered the room, a kind-looking woman who immediately began speaking softly to the boy and went downstairs. Roman was in handcuffs in the living room, being held by 2 uniformed officers. When he saw Kent, his face contorted with rage. You son of a bitch. You set us up. No, Kent said, moving closer. You set yourselves up. I just gave you the rope and watched you hang yourselves with it. We didn't do anything. You can't prove. I can prove everything. Kent pulled out his phone and pulled up the video files. I have videos of you coming into my house, of you planning with Sherry to frame me, of you pushing my 9-year-old son down the stairs. I have texts, recorded conversations, and witness testimony. You wanted to destroy my life? Congratulations. You destroyed your own, instead. Roman's face went pale as the implications sank in. Franklin Manning approached Kent, his expression a mixture of relief and concern. We got everything we need. The video evidence you provided, combined with what we just witnessed and the boys' testimony, it's airtight. They're going away for a long time. Good, Kent said. Then, before anyone could stop him, he stepped closer to Roman Wheeler. You hurt my son. You terrorized him for months. You made him afraid in his own home. Kent, Franklin warned. But Kent wasn't planning violence. He just needed Roman to know. You're going to prison, both of you. And word's going to spread about what you did hurting a little kid, framing his father. You know what inmates do to people who hurt children, Roman? They make prison very, very unpleasant. Roman's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. The cocky confidence was gone, replaced by genuine fear. Kent turned away, disgusted, and went back upstairs to Toby. The next few hours were a blur of statements and procedures. Toby was examined by a pediatrician specializing in abuse cases, Dr. Eugene Atkinson, who documented every bruise and injury. Kent provided all the video evidence, the text messages, everything he'd collected. Child Protective Services got involved. But with Kent clearly the victim of a conspiracy and Sherry under arrest, they concluded Toby was safe in his father's custody. By evening, Kent and Toby were back home, but it felt different now, lighter somehow, despite the trauma. They ordered pizza and sat on the couch together. Toby tucked under Kent's arm. Is it really over? Toby asked quietly. Yeah, buddy. It's really over. What's going to happen to Mom? Kent chose his words carefully. She's going to have to answer for what she did. She's going to be gone for a long time. But that's not your fault, okay? None of this was ever your fault. Toby nodded against his chest. Are you going to find someone new? Another mom for me? Someday, maybe, when we're both ready. But right now, it's just you and me, kid. And that's more than enough. The weeks that followed were difficult but healing. Sherry and Roman were both charged with multiple felonies: child abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud, witness tampering, and perjury. Roman also faced charges for assault. The evidence was overwhelming, and their public defenders advised them to take plea deals. Sherry got 12 years in prison. Roman got 15, with the assault charges adding additional time. Their mugshots made the local news, and Kent felt a grim satisfaction seeing them exposed for what they really were. But Kent's revenge didn't end with their arrests. He contacted every member of Sherry's family, sending them the videos and text messages, ensuring they knew exactly what she'd done. He reached out to Roman's fitness center employer and provided evidence of Roman's actions, getting him permanently fired and blacklisted from the industry. He made sure their crimes were posted on every public record site, ensuring that anyone who Googled their names would find the truth. Some might call it overkill. Kent called it justice. 3 months after Sherry's arrest, Kent and Toby sat in a family therapist's office. Dr. Dorothy Carey, yes, the same Mrs. Carey, who'd been Toby's teacher and had noticed something was wrong, had recommended the therapist, a specialist in childhood trauma. Toby was slowly opening up, slowly learning to trust again, slowly becoming a kid again instead of a victim. Kent watched his son draw during one session a picture of the two of them building with Legos, like they used to before everything went wrong. The drawing was hopeful, bright, showing a future where they were happy. Kent felt tears prick his eyes. You're doing great work, the therapist told them at the end of the session. Both of you. Toby's resilience is remarkable, Kent. A lot of that comes from having a parent who fought for him. Kent squeezed Toby's hand. I'll always fight for him. 6 months after everything fell apart, Kent and Toby were rebuilding. Kent had taken a leave of absence from work to focus on his son, and when he returned, his team at Ayers Restoration welcomed him back with understanding and support. Stephen Michael had been there through it all, helping with logistics and just being a friend when Kent needed one. The Victorian Mansion restoration project was completed ahead of schedule, beautiful and solid and permanent, unlike the marriage Kent had thought would last forever. He found metaphor in his work now. Sometimes you had to tear down damaged structures to build something better. Sometimes what looked beautiful on the outside was rotting from within. And sometimes the most important work was making sure the foundation was solid. Toby joined a new soccer team and started laughing again. He made friends, real friends, and started bringing them home for playdates. The bruises faded. The fear in his eyes diminished. He was healing. One Saturday afternoon, 8 months after Sherry's arrest, Kent and Toby were in the backyard teaching Toby to ride his bike without training wheels. Toby had been too scared to try before, too afraid of falling, too afraid of everything. But now he was pedaling, wobbling, finding his balance. "I'm doing it, Dad. I'm really doing it." "You are, buddy. You're amazing." Toby rode in circles, his face split in a huge grin, the autumn sun turning his hair golden. Kent watched his son free, happy, safe, and felt something shift in his chest. They'd survived. More than that, they were thriving. The people who'd tried to destroy them were locked away, paying for their crimes. And Kent and Toby had their whole lives ahead of them. That evening, as Kent tucked Toby into bed, his son looked up at him with serious eyes. "Dad, thank you for believing me, for saving me." Kent kissed his forehead. "You saved yourself by finally telling the truth. I just helped, and I always will, no matter what. That's what dads do. I love you. I love you too, buddy, more than anything in the world." As Kent turned off the light and closed the door, he paused in the hallway. He thought about the man he'd been a year ago trusting, maybe too trusting, focused on work and assuming everything at home was fine. That man was gone. In his place was someone harder, more vigilant, but also more present. Someone who'd learned that the worst threats don't always come from outside. Sometimes they're already in your home, wearing a familiar face. But he'd also learned that he was stronger than he'd thought, smart enough to outmaneuver enemies who'd underestimated him, brave enough to do whatever it took to protect his child, patient enough to wait for the right moment to strike. Sherry and Roman had thought they were so clever, so certain they could destroy Kent and get away with it. They'd underestimated him completely. They'd seen a man distracted by work, a mild-mannered architect who avoided confrontation. They hadn't seen the strategist, the planner, the father who would move heaven and earth to save his son. Their mistake, their downfall. Kent went downstairs to his home office and pulled up his computer. He'd been working on something for the past few weeks, a presentation about recognizing signs of domestic abuse and parental alienation. Local schools had started asking him to speak after hearing his story. He was turning his nightmare into something that might help other families, other kids like Toby. As he worked, refining slides and adding statistics, Kent felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not happiness, not yet. That would come with more time, but peace. The knowledge that he'd done everything right when it mattered most. That his son was safe. That the bad guys had lost. And if there was satisfaction in knowing that Sherry woke up every morning in a prison cell, facing years more of the same? If there was dark pleasure in knowing that Roman Wheeler, the cocky fitness trainer who'd thought he was untouchable, was now just another inmate with a target on his back. Well, Kent was only human, and some victories were meant to be savored. The story of Kent and Toby Ayers spread through their community, a cautionary tale and an inspirational one. People who'd known Sherry were shocked. People who'd met Roman Wheeler weren't surprised that all the cracks in his character had always been there for those who looked. And people who knew Kent came to respect him even more, seeing the strength it took to do what he'd done. A year after the arrests, Kent received a letter from Sherry. She'd written it from prison, on cheap paper with shaky handwriting. She claimed she was sorry. She claimed she'd been manipulated by Roman. She claimed she never meant to really hurt Toby. She claimed if Kent would testify at her parole hearing, if he'd show mercy. Kent read the letter once, then fed it through his paper shredder. Mercy? She'd shown Toby no mercy. She planned to destroy Kent's life with no remorse. She'd traumatized their child for greed and lust. Whatever consequences she faced now, she'd earned every single one. He wrote back, a single sentence on his lawyer's letterhead. "You will never see Toby or me again." He felt nothing as he mailed it. She was irrelevant now, a closed chapter in a book he'd rather forget but couldn't. The important thing was moving forward, and they did move forward. Kent eventually started dating again, carefully, never bringing anyone around Toby until he was sure. Toby excelled in school. his natural brightness returning as the trauma faded. They went on trips, camping, museums, the beach. They built their life, just the two of them, on a foundation of trust and truth. Sometimes Toby still had nightmares. Sometimes Kent still felt the cold rage when he remembered what Sherry had done. But those moments grew less frequent, less intense. Healing wasn't linear, but it was happening. On Toby's 11th birthday, Kent took him to the climbing gym they used to frequent before everything went wrong. Toby was taller now, confident, ready to tackle harder routes. Kent belayed him as he climbed, watching his son reach for holds, problem solve, push himself higher. On belay, Toby called from the top of the wall, the traditional climber's signal. Belay on, Kent called back, keeping the rope secure, ready to catch his son if he fell. But Toby didn't fall. He rappelled down smoothly, landing with a grin. New personal record. I knew you could do it. Yeah, Toby said, pulling off his climbing shoes. I knew I could too. And in that moment, watching his son's confidence, his joy, his resilience, Kent knew they'd truly won. Not just against Sherry and Roman, against the trauma, the fear, the damage they tried to inflict. Kent and Toby had survived, and more than that, they'd thrived. The bad guys were in prison. The good guys were free. Justice had been served, and every bruise on Toby's body had faded away, leaving no scars, no permanent damage. Just a kid who'd learned he was stronger than he thought, and a father who'd learned he'd do anything, absolutely anything, to protect his child. Some stories end with revenge. This one ended with redemption. And that, Kent thought as he watched his son laugh with friends at his birthday party that evening, was the best victory of all.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.